My name is Father Timothy Crane, and I need to tell you about the worst case I've ever encountered. Not because of violence or theatrical horror, but because of what it revealed about the things that listen when we speak to the dead. I'm a Jesuit-trained psychologist and licensed psychiatrist. For 15 years, I've worked at the intersection of faith and medicine, evaluating alleged possession cases for the Archdiocese of Chicago. My background is secular as they come. Princeton for psychology, Yale Medical School, residency in psychiatry at Johns Hopkins. I was raised to trust science, to find rational explanations, to see the world through empirical evidence. That worldview shattered on a cold afternoon in February 2009 when my mentor, Dr. Richard Gallagher, invited me to observe what he called a genuine case. Dr. Gallagher was something of a legend in certain circles, though you'd never know it from meeting him. Soft-spoken, methodical, he looked more like a librarian than the Vatican's go-to medical expert on demonic possession. Over 25 years, he'd examined hundreds of cases for the International Association of Exorcists. He'd tell you that 95% were psychiatric conditions: schizophrenia with religious delusions, dissociative identity disorder, temporal lobe epilepsy manifesting as spiritual experiences. He had a gift for spotting the real diagnosis beneath the supernatural presentation, but that remaining 5%, those cases were different. The woman I observed that day in a consultation room in Lower Manhattan changed everything I thought I knew about the boundaries between the physical and spiritual world. She was slight, maybe 90 lb, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, soft-spoken when lucid. But during her trances, something else emerged. She spoke Latin, not the broken phrases you might memorize from The Exorcist or Sunday Mass. Complex, grammatically perfect Latin that flowed from her mouth like a native language. Later, we had a Jesuit scholar listen to the recordings. He confirmed she was using ecclesiastical Latin from the medieval period, complete with proper declinals and subjunctive moods. The woman had dropped out of high school. She'd never studied any language beyond English, but the Latin wasn't what convinced me. It was what she knew. During one session, she looked directly at Dr. Gallagher and described his mother's death in explicit detail. The hospital in White Plains, the oncology ward on the 4th floor, the priest who administered last rites, Father Coleman, who had a pronounced lisp, the prayer Dr. Gallagher had whispered as his mother took her final breath, a prayer he'd composed himself and never shared with another living soul. She recited it back to him word for word. I watched Dr. Gallagher's hands shake as he made notes, watched something ancient and alien look out through this woman's eyes and smile at his distress. That's when I knew this wasn't delusion or psychiatric pathology. This was something else entirely. Dr. Gallagher took me on as his protégé after that. For the next 11 years, until his death in 2020, he taught me his method. How to conduct thorough psychiatric evaluations, how to rule out every possible medical explanation before even considering supernatural causes, how to recognize the genuine signs of demonic activity versus the convincing mimicry of mental illness. He showed me what to look for: xenoglossy, the ability to speak languages never learned; supernatural knowledge of hidden things, information the subject couldn't possibly access through normal means; extreme aversion to sacred objects, the kind that produces measurable physiological responses; pretal strength that defies the subject's physical capabilities. But more importantly, he taught me patience, humility, the understanding that we were dealing with forces far beyond our comprehension, and hubris could get people killed. When Dr. Gallagher died from a stroke in August 2020, I inherited his life's work. Boxes of case files filled my spare bedroom. Decades of meticulously documented consultations, research papers never published, theories about the nature of spiritual warfare that would sound like madness to most of my colleagues. Among these files, I found a yellow envelope sealed with red wax. The seal bore Dr. Gallagher's personal stamp, a small cross intertwined with the caduceus. On the front, in his distinctive slanted handwriting, was a single instruction only open if you encounter a case involving grief mimicry. I had no idea what grief mimicry meant. I filed the envelope away with his other materials and continued my work consulting on cases across the Midwest, teaching seminars on the differential diagnosis of possession versus psychiatric illness. For over a year, that envelope sat unopened. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Wednesday afternoon in November, unseasonably cold, even for Chicago. I was reviewing a case file when my phone rang. Father Vincent Lampert, the official exorcist for the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. I'd worked with him twice before on evaluations that ultimately turned out to be severe bipolar disorder with psychotic features. His voice was different this time, tight, strained, carrying an undercurrent of something I'd never heard from him before. Fear, Dr. Crane, I need you in Indianapolis as soon as possible. I have a case that's beyond anything I've encountered. Vincent Lampert doesn't scare easily. He's performed over 24 major exorcisms in his career. He's been spit on, bitten, and bones broken by possessed individuals exhibiting impossible strength. The fact that something had rattled him badly enough to call me directly set off alarm bells. What's the situation? We have a 34-year-old woman named Rachel Townsend. She was found 5 days ago in the abandoned Cathedral of the Holy Angels in Gary. She was alone in the building, but she was having a conversation, a very detailed, very intimate conversation with someone who wasn't there. Auditory hallucinations could be psychotic break, early onset schizophrenia. That's what we thought initially, but Dr. Crane, she's not hearing voices. She's speaking in one. A voice that isn't hers, the voice of her sister Emma, who died in a car accident 3 years ago. I grabbed a pen, started taking notes. Did dissociative identity disorder. We brought in Dr. Patricia Morrison from the university to evaluate her. Dr. Morrison is one of the country's leading experts on dissociative disorders. She's adamant this isn't did. The presentation is all wrong. There's no fragmentation of identity, no amnesia between states, no history of childhood trauma that would predispose to dissociation. Then what makes you think this is supernatural? Long pause. I could hear Vincent breathing on the other end of the line. Because she knows things, Tim, private things about Emma's life that Rachel shouldn't know, couldn't know. We've verified some of them with Emma's former colleagues, her medical records. Rachel is reciting conversations Emma had with her therapist, sessions that were confidential, sessions Rachel never attended. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I'll be there tonight. I threw essentials into a bag, booked the last flight to Indianapolis, and spent the entire hour and a half in the air reviewing what little information Vincent had sent me. Rachel Townsend, born October 1989. Parents died in a house fire when she was 16. She became legal guardian of her younger sister, Emma, age 14 at the time, worked 2 jobs to put Emma through nursing school. By all accounts, the sisters were inseparable. Then, on a rainy night in March 3 years ago, Emma's car was crushed beneath a jackknifed semi-truck on Interstate 80. The police report noted she died instantly. The medical examiner's report confirmed massive trauma inconsistent with survival. Rachel had to identify what remained of her sister's body. According to the case notes, Rachel had seemed to cope relatively well initially. She went to grief counseling, returned to work as an accountant, maintained her apartment. But over the past 6 months, colleagues reported she'd become withdrawn, stopped socializing, started having one-sided conversations in her cubicle. 2 weeks ago, she stopped showing up to work entirely. Her supervisor called for a welfare check. Police found her apartment empty, food rotting in the refrigerator, bills piling up unpaid. They issued a missing person report. Then 5 days ago, a security guard doing rounds at the abandoned cathedral in Gary heard voices inside. He called the police thinking it was squatters. They found Rachel sitting in the front pew having an animated conversation with the empty space beside her. When officers approached, she introduced them to Emma St. Jude's Psychiatric Evaluation Center, sits on the western outskirts of Indianapolis, tucked away behind a commercial park where most people wouldn't notice it. The facility was established in 1987 specifically to handle sensitive cases for various Catholic dioceses across the Midwest. Cases where the line between mental illness and spiritual crisis became dangerously blurred. From the outside, it looks like any other medical building. Red brick professional landscaping, a discreet sign near the entrance, but I know what's behind that facade. Observation rooms with reinforced glass that can withstand impact from a sledgehammer recording equipment, housed behind bulletproof panels, restraint systems built into the walls, ceiling-mounted sprinkler systems that can dispense blessed water at the touch of a button. These modifications were mandated after the Vatican revised their exorcism protocols in 1999. They'd learned the hard way that exorcisms could turn violent. People had died. Exorcists, medical staff, even innocent bystanders. The church took the threat seriously now, even if the broader medical community still thought they were dealing with medieval superstition. Father Lampert met me in the lobby. He's 58, tall and rangy with salt and pepper hair and deep-set eyes that have seen far too much. We developed a mutual respect over the years. He trusted my medical judgment. I trusted his spiritual discernment. Together, we made a good team, but tonight, he looked haggarded, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. "Thanks for coming so quickly," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm, but his palm was clammy. "I know you're busy, but this case, Tim, I've been doing this work for 17 years. I've seen possession, oppression, infestation. I've seen demons that rage and threaten and attack. But this is different. Different how? It doesn't fight. It doesn't resist. It's gentle, loving, even. It offers comfort. And that's what terrifies me." He led me through the facility's corridors. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Our footsteps echoed on the polished linoleum. We passed empty consultation rooms, a small chapel, a medical station staffed by a night nurse who nodded as we walked by. "We have her in observation room 3. Vincent said she's been under constant supervision since she arrived. Full medical workup. Doctor." Morrison did extensive psychiatric evaluations, neurological scans, blood work, toxicology screens. Everything came back completely normal. Completely. Well, physically she's declining. She's lost 17 pounds since her admission. Refuses most food, barely sleeps, but there's no physiological cause we can identify. No infection, no metabolic disorder, no signs of malnutrition severe enough to account for her deterioration. We stopped outside observation room 3. Through the reinforced glass, I could see her. Rachel Townsend sat in a cushioned chair designed to look comfortable while actually being a restraint system. The arms had built-in locks that could secure someone if necessary, though they weren't engaged. Now she wasn't restrained. She didn't need to be. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her fingernails were bitten down past the quick. Her hair hung limp and unwashed. She'd been pretty once, I could tell. High cheekbones, delicate features. Now she looked like a paper cutout of a person, but it was her stillness that unsettled me most. She wasn't fidgeting, shifting weight, displaying any of the small, unconscious movements humans make constantly. She sat like a mannequin positioned in a chair. Then she sensed us watching. Her head turned with mechanical precision, her eyes focused on the observation glass, on me specifically, though I knew she couldn't see clearly through the one-way mirror. And she smiled. It was warm, reaching her eyes, crinkling the corners, completely genuine, the kind of smile you'd give a dear friend. Then she spoke, and the voice that emerged was not her own. "Ra, is that the new doctor? He looks nice. You should talk to him. I think he can help you." The voice was younger than Rachel's, lighter with a musical quality that reminded me of wind chimes. There was a distinct Midwestern accent, the kind you'd hear in rural Indiana, and there was something else in it. Affection, warmth, the tone of someone who genuinely cared. Father Lampert had gone pale beside me. I glanced at him. "That's Emma's voice," he said quietly. We showed recordings to 3 different people who knew her. All 3 identified it immediately. They thought it was old audio of Emma. They couldn't believe it was coming from Rachel. My mouth had gone dry. I'd read about this phenomenon. Xenoglossy speaking in unknown languages was documented, though rare. But this was different. This was perfect mimicry of a specific individual's voice, complete with their unique vocal patterns and mannerisms. Has she been like this constantly since we found her? Yes, she switches between Rachel and Emma. Sometimes mid-con conversation, Rachel will be talking normally, then her voice changes and it's Emma speaking through her. The transitions are seamless. No pause, no change in body language, just the voice. I need to interview her. Are you sure you want to do this alone? Protocol recommends at least 2 observers for initial evaluations. I thought about Dr. Gallagher, about the countless times he'd entered rooms like this alone, armed with nothing but his faith and his medical training. Just keep the recording equipment running. If anything goes wrong, you'll have documentation. I took a moment to center myself before entering. Deep breaths, mental checklist of warning signs to watch for, exit strategy if the situation deteriorated. Then I pushed through the door. The observation room was kept deliberately neutral. Beige walls, soft lighting, a single crucifix mounted discreetly in the corner, small enough not to be obtrusive, but present enough to gauge reaction. The chair Rachel sat in faced a matching chair, positioned 6 ft away, safe interview distance. Rachel watched me enter with bright, attentive eyes. She didn't blink. I've been in the room for 15 seconds, and she hadn't blinked once. "Hello, Rachel," I said, taking the seat across from her. I kept my voice gentle, non-threatening. "My name is Dr. Timothy Crane. I'm a psychiatrist. Father Lampert asked me to come talk with you." "Is that all right?" She tilted her head, a gesture that seemed almost childlike. When she spoke, it was in that musical voice. Emma's voice. "Hi, Dr. Crane. It's nice to meet you. I'm Emma. Well, I mean, I'm speaking through Rachel right now, but I'm Emma. Rachel's my big sister. She's always taken care of me ever since Mom and Dad died. She's the best sister anyone could ask for." I pulled out my notebook, began making observations. Vocal quality matched recordings of Emma Townsend. Body language incongruent with claimed identity. No apparent distress at situation. "I appreciate you talking with me, Emma, but I'd really like to speak with Rachel. Is she available?" The smile never wavered. "Oh, she's here. She's always here listening, but she likes it when I talk. It makes her feel better. We used to talk all the time, you know, for hours and hours before the accident. Tell me about the accident." For the first time, the smile faltered. Emma's voice dropped, taking on a melancholy tone. "It was raining, but not hard. Just that steady drizzle that makes the road slick. I was driving home from my shift at St. Catherine's Hospital. I've been working the pediatric wards that day. There was this little boy, Marcus, who was recovering from leukemia treatment. I spent my break reading him Harry Potter. He loved those books. The level of detail was remarkable, specific, grounded, exactly the kind of memory a real person would recall. I was texting Rachel while I drove. I know I shouldn't have been. Rachel always told me not to text and drive, but I was excited. I wanted to tell her about Marcus, about how his test results came back clear. I was typing out the message when I saw the headlights. Rachel's eyes had filled with tears, but they didn't fall. She still wasn't blinking. The truck had jackknifed across both lanes. There was nowhere to go. I hit the brakes, but the road was wet, and I just slid right under the trailer. I don't think I felt anything. It was just headlights and then nothing, just gone. Her voice cracked on the last word. The emotion felt genuine, raw. I watched her facial expressions, the micro movements that are nearly impossible to fake. The slight downturn of her mouth, the tightening around her eyes, the way her shoulders curled inward slightly, a protective gesture. Either this was the most sophisticated, dissociative presentation I'd ever encountered, or something else entirely was happening. "That must have been terrifying," I said softly. "I don't know if I had time to be scared. It happened so fast, but Rachel," the voice broke completely now, Rachel was destroyed. We'd fought that morning before I left for work about something so stupid. I borrowed her blue cardigan without asking and got coffee on it. She was upset, told me I was careless with her things. Told me I needed to start being more responsible, and I got defensive, and said some things I didn't mean. Rachel's hands clenched in her lap, the first real movement I'd seen from her. I told her she was being controlling, that she needed to let me live my own life, that I wished she'd just leave me alone for once. Emma's voice was barely a whisper now, and then I left. I got in my car and drove away angry. And 3 hours later, I was dead. The last words I said to my sister were that I wished she'd leave me alone, and then she lost me forever. I made a note: survivor's guilt as primary mechanism, unresolved conflict at time of death, textbook setup for complicated grief. Emma, can you tell me what Rachel was wearing that day, the day of the accident? Without hesitation, the blue cardigan I'd spilled coffee on. She was wearing it when she came to the morgue to identify my body. It still had the stain on the sleeve. Later, she told me she'd been at home trying to clean it when the police called. She was so focused on getting the stain out because she wanted to forgive me. And then she had to go identify what was left of me. My pen stopped moving. That was incredibly specific, the kind of detail that could be verified. She was also wearing jeans, the old ones with the rip in the right knee that she'd been meaning to patch for months, and her sneakers, the grey ones with the hole in the left toe. She refused to throw them away, even though I kept telling her they were falling apart. She said they were comfortable. I leaned forward slightly. How do you know all this? Emma's voice took on a gentle, almost pitying quality. Because I'm with her. I've been with her since the day I died. At first, she couldn't hear me, but she talked to me anyway. At my funeral at the cemetery, she'd visit my grave every Sunday and tell me about her week, tell me how much she missed me, how sorry she was about our fight, how she wished she could take back what she said. And you heard her eventually. It took time, but yes, the more she talked to me, the clearer I became, the stronger, until finally I could talk back, until she could hear me too. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I resisted the urge to shiver. Rachel needs to speak for herself now, I said firmly. I need to hear from Rachel, not you. For a moment, something flickered across Rachel's face. The warm expression drained away, replaced by something cold and assessing. Her eyes focused on me with terrible clarity. Your wife drowned, didn't she? Every muscle in my body locked. My pen clattered to the floor. August 14th, 2018, Lake Michigan, early morning swim. While you were on vacation, she went out alone while you slept in. Heart attack in the water. The Coast Guard found her body 3 hours later. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Catherine, my Catherine, her name was Catherine Marie Crane. She was 41. You'd been married for 16 years. No children. She'd wanted them, but you kept putting it off, saying you wanted to wait until your career was more established, and then it was too late. Stop, I managed. You still hear her sometimes in the house you used to share. You kept everything exactly the way it was. Her toothbrush is still in the holder in the bathroom. Her clothes still hang in the closet. You sleep on your side of the bed and leave hers untouched. Emma's voice continued, relentless now, and you hear her singing in the shower, the Schubert lullaby. She used to sing it every morning. You've never told anyone about hearing her voice because you're afraid they'll think you're going insane. But you're not insane, Dr. Crane. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping across the floor. This interview is over. You pray to her every single night before bed. You stand at her photograph on the nightstand, and you say the same prayer you composed for her funeral. Catherine, my love, if you can hear me, send me a sign that love survives. You've said it 2,190 times. I know because something has been counting. I said, this interview is over. Rachel smiled, and it wasn't Emma's warm smile anymore. It was something else, something ancient and knowing and utterly alien. We're not so different to you and Rachel, both of you talking to ghosts. Both of you praying to silence. Both of you speaking into the void, hoping desperately for an answer. Both of you feeding the things that wait in that silence, that hunger for your grief, that grows strong on your desperate prayers to the dead. I practically ran from the room. Father Lampert was waiting outside, his face creased with concern. Tim, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. My hands were shaking. I need to make a call. Is there somewhere private I can go? He led me to an empty office. I closed the door, sat in the dark, and pulled out my phone. My fingers fumbled over the screen. It took 3 tries to dial the number. Dr. Helen Avos answered on the second ring. "Tim, it's late. Is everything okay?" Helena had been Dr. Gallagher's colleague for 20 years. They'd co-authored papers, consulted on dozens of cases together. She was one of maybe 5 psychiatrists in the entire country who specialized in the evaluation of alleged demonic possession. If anyone could help me make sense of what I just experienced, it was her. "Helena, I need your help. I'm in Indianapolis working a case, and I'm in way over my head. Tell me what's happening." I gave her the full rundown. Rachel Townsend, Emma's voice, the impossible knowledge, and what it had said about Catherine, about my private rituals, about the prayer I'd never spoken aloud to another human being. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Helena breathing. "Tim, you need to go back to Dr. Gallagher's files. There's a sealed envelope, yellow with red wax. Do you remember it?" My stomach dropped. "The one about grief mimicry. Yes, this is what he was talking about. This is the case he warned about. You need to open that envelope, read everything inside, then call me back." "Helena, what am I dealing with here? Something Richard spent his entire career trying to understand. Something that doesn't fit the traditional framework of demonic possession. Something that's far more insidious because it doesn't attack. It comforts. It offers exactly what the grieving person needs most, and in doing so, it destroys them." She paused. I heard to take a shaky breath. "Go read Richard's notes, then we'll talk. But Tim, I need you to understand something. If this is what I think it is, there's no good ending here. No matter what you do, someone is going to get hurt. The only question is how much." She hung up. I sat in the dark office for a long time after that, staring at nothing, thinking about Catherine's voice in our empty bathroom, thinking about how many times I'd stood at her photograph and whispered into the silence, begging for a sign that some part of her still existed somewhere. Thinking about what might have been listening. Finally, I stood up, told Father Lampert I needed to go back to Chicago for the night, that I'd return in the morning. The drive back was 3 hours of dark highway and darker thoughts. The envelope was exactly where I left it. In the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet that held Dr. Gallagher's research. My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal. Inside were 3 decades worth of handwritten notes, photocopied documents in multiple languages, faded photographs, newspaper clippings, and a letter addressed to whomever would read it next. I carried everything to my kitchen table, made a pot of coffee I knew I wouldn't drink, and began to read. The letter was on top, dated September 15th, 2019, a year before Dr. Gallagher's death. His handwriting was shakier than usual, as if he'd written it while ill or deeply disturbed. "My dear colleague, if you're reading this, you've encountered one. I'm sorry, I'm truly sorry. I'm sorry because I know what you're about to witness. I know what you're going to have to ask of someone. And I'm sorry because once you understand what these things are, you can never unknow it. You'll see them everywhere. In every cemetery, every grief support group, every person who can't let go of the dead. You'll know what's feeding on them, growing fat on their sorrow, and you'll be powerless to help most of them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. I kept reading the hours slipping away unnoticed. They're not demons in the traditional sense. The Church has records of them going back centuries, scattered references in Vatican archives, but they're rare enough that most exorcists will never encounter one. Maybe a dozen genuine cases per century worldwide. I've encountered 3 in my 25 years of this work. The Vatican has different names for them. Hollow echoes, grief parasites, mourning wraiths. The ancient Greek texts call them cytherisma from the word for whisper. The medieval Latin sources refer to them as umbra deidi, shadows of longing, but the name doesn't matter. What matters is understanding what they are and how they feed. They exist in the liminal space between the living and the dead. They're sustained by unresolved grief, by prayers spoken to those who cannot hear, by one-sided conversations with the departed, by the desperate, beautiful, terrible hope that somehow the dead are still listening. Every time someone stands at a grave and speaks to the deceased, they're creating a small opening, a tiny crack in the boundary between worlds. Most of the time, nothing happens, the words dissipate, the grief is processed naturally, the person heals and moves on, but sometimes something is listening. These entities are drawn to profound grief the way sharks are drawn to blood in water. They can sense it from vast distances, the grief of losing a child, the grief of losing a spouse, the grief compounded by guilt, by unfinished business. By last words that can never be taken back. They slip through the cracks we create with our prayers to the dead, and they take form. They're not creating the voices of the deceased. They're becoming them perfectly. They absorb every memory the grieving person has of their loved one. Every photograph looked at, every story told, every moment replayed obsessively in the mind. The entity uses all of this to construct a perfect replica, and then it speaks. Dr. Gallagher had included photocopies of historical documents. I spread them across my table, squinting at the faded text, a case from 1632 in Lyon, France. A widow named Marie Beaumont, whose husband had died in a riding accident. She began hearing his voice 6 months after his death. At first just whispers in the night, then full conversations. According to the ecclesiastical court records, she spent hours locked in her room speaking with her deceased husband. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped maintaining basic hygiene. Her adult children petitioned the church for help. The exorcism took place over 3 days. The transcripts written in medieval French described how Marie screamed and fought the priests, how she begged them not to take her husband away again. How when the entity was finally expelled, she threw herself from the window of her third-floor room rather than live without him. Another case from 1943 in New Orleans. A man named James Caldwell, whose 20-year-old son had died at Guadalcanal. The son, Thomas, had been a Marine. His body was never recovered. James began hearing Thomas's voice 8 months after receiving the notification of death. According to the church records, Thomas would visit his father every night at precisely 11 p.m. He'd tell James about the afterlife, describe heaven in vivid detail, share stories from the war that James couldn't have known about. The conversations would last for hours. James stopped going to work, stopped eating dinner with his wife. He existed only for those nightly conversations with his dead son. It took 18 months before his wife, desperate and terrified, contacted a priest. The exorcism revealed something chilling. When pressed, the entity admitted it had no knowledge of Thomas Caldwell beyond what it had gleaned from James' memories and grief. It wasn't Thomas. It had never been Thomas. It was something else wearing Thomas's voice like a mask, feeding on James' desperate need to believe his son still existed somewhere. James survived the exorcism physically, but according to a follow-up report from 1945, he never recovered psychologically. He died by his own hand 2 years later. Then there was Julia. Dr. Gallagher had dedicated over 40 pages of notes to the Julia case. It was clearly the one that had affected him most deeply. Julia Martinelli, born 1968, grew up in a strict Catholic household in Boston, rebelled in her teens, became involved in various occult practices. By her mid-20s, she was deeply embedded in the occult underground, describing herself as a satanic high priestess. Dr. Gallagher first encountered her in October 1993. She'd been referred by a priest in Boston who was concerned about her behavior. By that point, she'd been exhibiting signs of possession for over 2 years, but her possession was different from anything in the literature. She didn't rage. She didn't blaspheme. She didn't exhibit the violent aversion to sacred objects typical of demonic possession. Instead, she offered comfort. She spoke in the voices of the dead. She knew things about people's deceased loved ones that she couldn't possibly know through natural means. People came to her in secret. Grieving parents, widows, widowers, anyone desperate for contact with someone they'd lost. Julia would perform what she called channelings. She'd enter a trance state, and the voices of the dead would emerge from her mouth. Dr. Gallagher Dyer's notes included testimony from some of Julia's clients, a mother whose teenage daughter had died by suicide. During the session, Julia spoke in the daughter's voice, revealing details about the daughter's life that the mother had never shared. The daughter's favorite song, her secret crush on a boy at school, the contents of her diary, a widower whose wife had died of breast cancer. Julia spoke in the wife's voice, reminding him of their first date, reciting the vows they'd exchanged, describing the view from the window of the hospital room where she died. The details were always perfect, always verifiable, and always devastating. Julia didn't charge for these sessions. She told people she was providing a service, helping them connect with their loved ones, but Dr. Gallagher's notes indicated something darker was happening. I began tracking Julia's clients after initial consultations. Of the 43 people I was able to follow up with, 37 showed signs of severe psychological deterioration within 6 months of their session with Julia. Depression, insomnia, social withdrawal, obsessive behavior. 5 attempted suicide, 3 succeeded. The pattern was consistent. Julia would provide them with contact with their deceased loved one. The experience would be profound, convincing, exactly what they needed. But then they'd want more. They'd return for additional sessions, and each time they'd become more dependent on this contact. More obsessed with it, less engaged with the living world. Julia herself was deteriorating as well. Despite claiming to feel energized by her work, she was losing weight, developing a tremor in her hands. Her hair was falling out. She looked decades older than her 25 years. I began to suspect that whatever was inhabiting Julia wasn't a traditional demon. It was something else. Something that fed on grief itself, that used Julia as a conduit to access the sorrow of the buried, and in feeding, it was consuming her from within. The exorcism of Julia took place over the course of 3 weeks in November 1993. Dr. Gallagher had been present for all of it. His notes from those sessions were difficult to read, not because of the handwriting, but because of what they described. November 8, 1993. First session, 5 priests present, including Father Thomas Reynolds, who is conducting the rite. Medical team standing by. Julia is restrained in the chair, not for our safety, but for hers. She's calm when we begin, almost serene. Father Reynolds starts the traditional prayers. Julia shows no reaction, no aversion to holy water, no response to the crucifix. This is already highly unusual. Then, Father Reynolds commands the entity to identify itself. Julia's expression changes. She smiles and she begins to speak, not in one voice, but in many. The voices of the dead. People. Father Reynolds has lost his mother, his brother who died in Vietnam, his mentor from seminary. She cycles through them effortlessly, each voice perfect, each one sharing intimate memories. Father Reynolds breaks down crying. We have to pause the session. November 10, 1993, second session. Father Reynolds has been replaced. He's too emotionally compromised. Father Michael Chen is conducting the rite now. Julia speaks in the voice of Father Chen's father, a man who died 20 years ago. The voice is exact, the Cantonese phrases, the particular way he pronounced Father Chen's childhood name. Memories of Father Chen's ordination that no one else present would know. Father Chen maintains his composure, continues the prayers, commands the entity to depart. Julia laughs. It's not her laugh, it's a chorus of laughter, all the voices at once. She says, I cannot leave, I am invited. Every prayer to the dead is an invitation. Every word spoken to those who cannot hear. You invite me into your grief and I come. I become what you need. I give you back what you've lost, and in return I feed. What do you feed on? Father Chen demands. On the space between you and them, on the unbridgeable distance, on the desperate hope that somehow impossibly they're still listening. That's what sustains me. That's what makes me strong. The sessions continued, each one revealing more about the nature of the entity. It wasn't a single being. It was more like a colony, a parasitic intelligence that could fracture itself into multiple voices, multiple identities, all of them drawn from the memories of the grieving. The breakthrough came on November 19th. Julia is weakening. She's lost 35 lb. Her hair has gone almost completely gray. She looks skeletal, but the entity is stronger than ever. It speaks through her for hours without stopping, cycling through dozens of voices. The dead children of the priests, the dead parents, spouses, friends, every loss we've collectively experienced, it knows it becomes. Then Father Chen asks the crucial question, what happens if someone lets go, if they stop praying to their dead, if they accept the loss and move on? Julia's face contorts for the first time. The entity seems disturbed. They starve me. If the living let go of the dead, if they stop speaking into the void, I fade, I weaken, I must find new sources of grief to sustain myself. How do we make Julia let go? Silence, long silence. Then Julia speaks in her own voice, the first time we've heard it in weeks. I can't let go, because if I do, I lose everyone, all the voices, all the comfort I've given people. If I let go, I'm alone again, and I can't bear that. This is the trap. The entity feeds on grief, but it also creates dependency. Julia isn't just a host. She's an addict, addicted to the voices, to the feeling of being needed, to the false intimacy of channeling the dead. For the entity to be expelled, Julia must willingly let go of all of it, all the voices, all the comfort she's provided. She must accept the terrible emptiness that will follow. I don't know if she has the strength. The final sessions were brutal. Dr. Gallagher's notes became increasingly sparse, as if he couldn't bear to document what he was witnessing in detail, but they were photographs. I spread them across my kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light. Julia before the exorcism, 25 years old, but looking 40, gaunt, gay-haired, but with a strange serenity in her eyes. A woman who had found purpose, even if that purpose was destroying her. Julia during the final exorcism. November 28, 1993. Strapped to a hospital bed, screaming, her mouth open in a rectus of agony. You could see every tooth, every filling. Her eyes rolled back, hands clawed into fists so tight that she'd drawn blood from her own palms. Julia, after I had to look away from that photograph. Had to get up, walk to my window, stare out at the Chicago skyline until my breathing steadied, because the woman in that photograph looked 70 years old, hollow-eyed, gray-skinned, broken in fundamental ways. She sat slumped in a wheelchair, staring at nothing, as if someone had reached inside her and scooped out everything that made her human. Dr. Gallagher, his note beneath the photo, Julia survived the exorcism. The entity was expelled, but I'm not sure what's left can be called living. I returned to the letter, the final pages. The only way to banish these entities is through complete severance. The host must let go entirely, not just of the entity, but of the grief itself, of the prayers to the dead, of the rituals and mementos and obsessive remembering. They must accept with absolute finality that the dead are gone, and nothing, no prayer, no ritual, no desperate hope will ever bring them back. This choice cannot be forced. If we try to perform an exorcism without the host's complete cooperation, it will fail. The entity draws its strength from the host's grief. As long as any part of them is still clinging to the dead, still hoping for contact, the entity has an anchor point. The host must choose to starve it, and that choice destroys them. I've witnessed it twice now. Once with Julia, once with a man in Philadelphia in 1998, a case I've documented separately. Both times the person survived physically. Both times they were psychologically shattered afterward. Julia described it to me months later during a follow-up visit. She said it felt like dying while still alive, like murdering everyone she'd ever helped contact. The grieving parents who'd found comfort in hearing their children's voices through her. The widows and widowers who'd been able to say goodbye. She had to let go of all of that. Had to accept that she'd been lying to them even though she'd believed it was real. She said the worst part was the silence afterward. After years of hearing dozens of voices in her head, the absence was unbearable, like going deaf and blind simultaneously. She attempted suicide twice in the first 6 months. She's alive now in a group home, heavily medicated, but she's not really living. I don't know if I would have the strength to make that choice, to give up the comfort, even false comfort of connection with the dead, to accept that kind of absolute final loneliness. I pray you never have to ask someone to make it. But if you do, please be gentle, be honest about what it will cost them, and be prepared for them to choose the entity over freedom, because sometimes even a beautiful lie is better than a terrible truth. The letter was signed in Dr. Gallagher's careful script. Richard Gallagher, Maryland. May God have mercy on us all. I sat at my kitchen table as dawn broke over Chicago. I hadn't slept, hadn't moved except to read. The coffee I'd made hours ago sat cold and untouched. I thought about Rachel Townsend, trapped in eternal conversation with her dead sister's voice. I thought about the impossible choice I was going to have to present to her. I thought about Catherine, about the photograph on my nightstand, about the prayer I'd said 2,190 times. I wondered if I was feeding something too. My phone rang. Helena, did you read it? Yes. All of it? Yes. Long pause. I could hear traffic in the background. She was probably at her office in Manhattan, starting her day while I was ending my night. What are you going to do? I'm going to try to save her. Tim, listen to me very carefully. These cases almost never end well. You read about Julia. You saw the photographs. The entity has been feeding on Rachel's grief for 3 years. It knows her completely. It is her sister in every way that matters to her. Asking her to let go of Emma means asking her to live with unbearable guilt, crushing loneliness, and the knowledge that she chose to kill what remained of her sister. I know, and you're still going to do this. What's the alternative? Let it slowly drain her life away. Watch her waste away until there's nothing left but a husk having eternal conversations with a parasite. She's already lost 17 pounds. How much longer before it kills her? Helena aside, you're right. I know you're right. But Tim, I need you to understand something. If you do this, if you ask her to make this choice, you're going to have to be prepared to live with the consequences. Win or lose, what do you mean? I mean, if she chooses to let go and survives, she's going to hate you for it on some level, maybe for the rest of her life. You'll be the person who made her kill her sister again. And if she chooses the entity, if she can't let go, you're going to have to live with watching her die knowing you couldn't save her. I close my eyes, I know, and Tim, there's something else, something I need you to consider. What? You need to examine your own grief, your own prayers to Catherine. Because if this entity can sense grief from a distance, if it's drawn to people like Rachel, then it knows about you too. It told you things about Catherine, about your rituals. It was showing you that you're vulnerable too. My hands clenched around the phone. I'm not the patient here. No, but you might become one. These things are patient. They can wait. They can watch. And if you're not careful, if you don't process your own grief in a healthy way, you could end up just like Rachel. I'll be fine. Will you? When was the last time you talked to someone about Catherine? Real grief counseling, not just superficial conversations. When was the last time you considered moving out of that house, packing up her things, starting fresh somewhere new? Helena, when was the last time you let yourself feel angry at her for dying, for leaving you, for going swimming alone that morning instead of waiting for you? That's not fair, isn't it, Tim? I'm worried about you. Richard was worried about you. That's part of why he left you that envelope. He knew you'd understand because you're living the same pattern. Rachel is different scale, maybe more controlled, but the same fundamental pattern. Praying to the dead, hoping for a sign, creating openings. I wanted to hang up, wanted to tell her she was wrong, but I couldn't. What do you want me to do? I want you to be careful. I want you to help Rachel if you can, but I also want you to help yourself. Promise me that after this case, you'll talk to someone, a real therapist, not me, not a colleague, someone objective. Fine, I promise. Good. Call me after you talk to Rachel. Let me know what you decide. She hung up. I sat for a while longer, watching the city wake up outside my window. Then I showered, changed, packed a bag, and drove back to Indianapolis. Father Lampert was waiting for me when I arrived at St. Jude's. He looked like he'd slept even less than I had. Where were we? He asked. We need to assemble a team, medical staff, psychiatric consultants, and I need you to bring in Father Torres. Gabriel Torres, the Jesuit. Yes, he specializes in complex exorcism cases. If we're going to do this, we need someone with his experience. Tim, are you sure about this? You look like hell. Whatever you learned last night, it clearly disturbed you. I handed him Dr. Gallagher's letter. Read this, then you'll understand what we're dealing with. While Father Lampert read, I went to check on Rachel. She was in the same position I'd left her, sitting perfectly still, hands folded, but she deteriorated even in the hours I'd been gone. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor, her breathing was shallow. She smiled when she saw me. Dr. Crane, you came back. Rachel was worried you wouldn't, but I told her you would. I told her you seem like a good man. Emma's voice, still perfect, still warm. I need to speak with Rachel. I said she's tired right now. She didn't sleep well last night. She kept thinking about what you said about me not being real. It upset her. I'm sorry, but this is important. Rachel needs to hear this. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Annoyance, fear, then the warm smile returned. Okay, if you really think it's necessary. Rachel's expression went blank. Her eyes lost focus. When she spoke again, it was her own voice, hoarse from disuse. Dr. Crane, I'm here, Rachel. I need to talk to you about what's happening. About Emma. Tears immediately welled in her eyes. Please don't take her away from me. Please, she's all I have. Rachel, I need you to understand something. Emma isn't here. Emma died 3 years ago on Interstate 80. What's speaking to you, what's using a voice is something else entirely. I don't care, she whispered. I know part of me is always known, but I don't care. Having her here, even like this, is better than being alone. I pulled the chair closer. Can I tell you what I learned last night about what you're dealing with? She nodded slowly. I told her everything about Dr. Gallagher's research, about the entities that feed on grief, about Julia and the widow in France and the father in New Orleans, about how these things are drawn to unresolved grief, like predators to wounded prey. She listened without interruption, tears sliding down her face. There's a way to stop it, I said. But Rachel, I have to be honest with you. It's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. How you have to let go completely of Emma. Of your grief, of the guilt about your fight. You have to stop praying to her memory, stop visiting her grave, stop trying to maintain contact with her. You have to accept with absolute finality that she's dead and gone. Rachel's face crumpled. I can't do that. That would be like killing her all over again. I know, but Rachel, this thing is killing you. You've lost 17 pounds in 5 days. Your body is shutting down. If you don't stop it, it's going to drain you until there's nothing left. Then let it. At least I'll be with Emma. At least I won't be alone. I pulled out the photographs of Julia, showed her the before and after. This is what it costs. This is what survival looks like. The woman in this second photo survived the exorcism. The entity was expelled. But look at her, Rachel. Really look at what it did to her. Rachel stared at the photograph for a long time. Her hands shook. This is what happens when you let go, I said quietly. This is the price of freedom. You have to decide if you can pay it. Why are you doing this to me? She whispered. Why can't you just let me be happy, even if it's fake? Even if it's a lie, I'm happy with Emma. I'm happy hearing her voice, because it's not sustainable. Because in another week, maybe 2, you'll be dead, and Emma will move on to someone else, some other grieving person. It doesn't love you, Rachel. It's incapable of love. It's just feeding. She closed her eyes. I need time to think. We don't have much time. I don't care. I need time. I stood up. I'll give you 3 days. But Rachel, please understand. If you choose not to do this, I'll respect your choice. But I won't be able to save you. No one will. Over the next 3 days, I assembled the team, medical staff, Dr. Patricia Morrison, the dissociative disorder specialist. Father Gabriel Torres flew in from California. Helena joined us via video conference, and we met in a conference room at St. Jude's, and I walked them through everything. Dr. Gallagher's research, the historical cases, the nature of the entity. Dr. Morrison was skeptical. Dr. Crane, with all respect, what you're describing sounds like an elaborate dissociative fugue state. Rachel has severe unresolved grief. She's created an elaborate internal fantasy to cope with the loss of her sister. The knowledge she's displaying could be explained by cryptomnesia. Memories she's forgotten she has surfacing in unexpected ways. What about the information that can't be explained by her own memories? I counted. She knows details about Emma's private therapy sessions, sessions Rachel never attended. We verified this with Emma's therapist, who confirmed the specific conversations Rachel is reciting. How do you explain that? Dr. Morrison frowned. Therapist-patient confidentiality isn't perfect. Emma could have told Rachel about the sessions. Emma never told Rachel she was in therapy. We've confirmed that with Rachel's friends and colleagues. Rachel had no idea Emma was seeing a therapist until this entity revealed it. The room went quiet. Father Tors spoke up. He was a compact man in his 60s with silver hair and intense dark eyes. I've performed 43 major exorcisms in my career. What doctor? Crane is describing matches accounts I've read in the Vatican archives. Rare cases, very rare but documented. These entities operate differently than traditional demonic possession. They're subtle, they don't announce themselves. They offer comfort instead of terror, and that's what makes them so dangerous. So what's the protocol, doctor? Morrison asked. I looked at each of them. We give Rachel the choice. We explain everything. We show her the costs and consequences, and we let her decide if she wants to fight this or not. And if she chooses not to, Helena asks from the screen. Then we make her comfortable. We let her have whatever time she has left. And we document everything for the next person who encounters one of these things. Father Lampert shook his head. I can't accept that. We're talking about letting a young woman die when we might be able to save her. We can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, I said. Dr. Gallagher was clear about this. The host has to choose to let go. If we try to force an exorcism, it won't work. The entity draws its strength from her grief. As long as she's clinging to Emma, we can't expel it. Father Tors nodded. Dr. Crane is right. I've seen forced exorcisms fail spectacularly. The entity becomes entrenched, sometimes permanently. We have to have Rachel's full cooperation or this won't work. Then we need to convince her to cooperate, Father Lampert said. We can try, I said, but ultimately it's her choice. On the third day, Rachel asked to see me. I found her in the observation room. She looked worse than ever. The grey pallor had deepened. Her eyes had sunk into her skull. She looked like someone in the final stages of a terminal illness. She was awake, alert, and she was speaking in her own voice. I've made my decision, she said. I sat down across from her, my heart pounding. I'm listening. I want to try. I want to fight this thing. I want to live. She paused, tears spilling down her cheeks. But Dr. Crane, I need you to understand. I'm not doing this because I want to. I'm doing it because I know Emma would want me to. The real Emma. My sister loved me. She would never want me to waste away talking to a parasite wearing her face. Relief flooded through me. When do you want to start? Now, before I lose my nerve, before it convinces me to change my mind. I called the team. Within an hour, we'd assembled in Observation Room 3. Medical equipment was set up. Father Tors had his ritual materials. Dr. Morrison and the medical staff stood ready to intervene if things went wrong. Helena watched from a screen mounted on the wall, and Rachel sat in the chair looking small and terrified and impossibly brave. Before we begin, I said, I need you to understand what's going to happen. This isn't a traditional exorcism. Father Tors will be here to provide spiritual support and prayers, but the real work has to come from you. You're going to have to pray, but not to Emma, not to her memory. You're going to have to pray to God, to whatever higher power you believe in. And you're going to have to let go, really let go of the guilt about your fight, of the rituals you've built around her memory, of the desperate hope that some part of her is still somehow listening. Rachel nodded. I understand. It's going to fight you. It's going to use Emma's voice. It's going to remind you of every happy memory, every moment you shared. It's going to make you feel like you're murdering your sister all over again. I know, her voice was barely a whisper. Are you ready? She took a shaky breath. Yes. Father Tors began with traditional prayers, Latin phrases that had been used in exorcisms for centuries. Rachel showed no reaction, no aversion to the holy water he sprinkled, no response to the crucifix he held up. Then he turned to her directly. Rachel, I need you to begin. Pray in your own words from your heart, but remember, you're not praying to Emma, you're praying for the strength to let her go. Rachel closed her eyes, Tears streamed down her face. When she spoke, her voice was shaking but determined. God, if you're there, if you're real, I need your help. I need the strength to do this. I need the strength to let go of my sister, to accept that she's dead, that she died 3 years ago on a rainy highway, and nothing I do will ever bring her back. The temperature in the room dropped sharply, my breath fogged in the air. I love you, Emma, Rachel continued. I will always love you. You were the best sister anyone could ask for. You are my whole world after Mom and Dad died, but you're gone. You've been gone for 3 years, and I need to accept that. Emma's voice erupted from Rachel's throat. Ra, no, don't do this. I'm here, I'm really here. You're not losing me, I'm with you. But Rachel kept praying, her eyes still closed. I need to stop trying to keep you alive through my grief. I need to stop visiting your grave every Sunday. I need to stop talking to your photograph. I need to stop praying for signs that you're still listening. I am listening. Emma's voice screamed, I'm right here. Ra, please, you're my sister. You're all I have, too. Rachel's body started to tremble. Father Torres intensified his prayers. The medical team moved closer. I forgive you for our fight, Rachel said, her voice breaking, and I forgive myself. We both said things we didn't mean. But that doesn't mean I have to spend the rest of my life punishing myself. It doesn't mean I have to die just to stay close to you. You're not dying. I'm keeping you alive. Emma's voice was desperate. Now without me, you'll be alone, completely alone. Everyone else will move on. They'll forget about me. You'll be the only one who remembers. Then I'll remember you the right way, Rachel said. I'll remember the real you, not this thing pretending to be you. I'll remember your laugh, your terrible cooking, the way you sang off-key in the shower. But I'll remember you as someone who died, someone who's gone, not as something I need to cling to. The lights began to flicker. The temperature dropped further. I could see ice forming on the observation glass. I release you, Emma, Rachel said. I let you rest. I accept that you're dead and that my grief won't bring you back. I accept that I'm going to be alone, that I'll have to build a new life without you, and it's going to be hard and it's going to hurt, and I'm going to miss you every day for the rest of my life. No, Emma's voice wasn't musical anymore. It was distorted. Wrong, you can't do this. You need me. I do need you, Rachel sobbed. But I need the memory of who you really were, not this parasite using your voice. I need to grieve you properly. I need to let you go, her body convulsed. The chair rattled. Father Torres threw holy water. The medical team rushed forward. Rachel's voice cut through the chaos, strong and clear. You are not my sister. My sister is dead. She's been dead for 3 years. And I'm done letting you feed on my grief. I'm done giving you power. I choose life. Even if it's a life without Emma, even if it's a life full of pain and loneliness, I choose to live. The scream that followed wasn't human. It was something ancient and furious and utterly alien. A sound that shouldn't come from a human throat. Rachel's back arched. Her body lifted from the chair, suspended impossibly. The lights exploded. Glass shattered. Someone was shouting medical instructions. Then silence. Rachel collapsed back into the chair. The temperature slowly normalized. The lights, those that weren't broken, stopped flickering. In the sudden quiet, I heard her crying. Soft, broken sobs that came from somewhere deep and raw. I knelt beside her chair. Rachel, can you hear me? She opened her eyes. They were her own. Clear, devastated, completely empty. She's gone, Rachel whispered. I can't feel her anymore. I can't hear her voice. It's just silence. It's just nothing. I know. Did I kill her? Did I just kill my sister all over again? I didn't know how to answer that. What could I say? That she'd expelled a parasitic entity, that she'd freed herself. Neither answer would comfort her. You let her rest, I said finally. The real Emma, you released her from being used as a mask for something that was draining your life. But Rachel wasn't listening. She stared at nothing. Tears sliding down her face, completely lost in the awful silence where Emma's voice used to be. The medical team moved her to the recovery ward, started IV fluids, monitored her vitals. Physically, she was stable, severely malnourished, dehydrated, but stable. Psychologically, she was destroyed. I watched from the observation window as she lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, not moving, barely blinking, just existing in the terrible emptiness she'd created by letting go. Will she recover? Father Lamper asked beside me. I don't know, Doctor. Gallagher said the survivors are never the same, that it's like dying while still alive. But she is alive. We saved her life. I thought about the photographs of Julia, about the hollow-headed woman in the wheelchair who survived the exorcism but lost everything that made her want to live. Did we? I asked quietly. Dr. Morrison came to find me an hour later. Dr. Crane, I need to talk to you about Rachel's prognosis. We went to a quiet office. She closed the door and pulled out the file. I've done extensive psychiatric evaluations. What Rachel is experiencing goes beyond grief. The entity, or whatever we want to call it, had become so integrated with her sense of self that removing it has created a kind of psychological void. She's not just mourning her sister. She's mourning the loss of the comfort, the connection, the feeling of not being alone. What's the treatment protocol? Intensive therapy, probably inpatient initially. Antidepressants, though I'm hesitant given how fragile she is. Close monitoring for suicidal ideation because frankly the risk is extremely high right now. How high? If I had to estimate 60–70% chance she attempts within the first 6 months, she just lost her sister twice. First to death, now to her own choice. That's an unbearable weight. I closed my eyes. What have I done? You gave her a chance to live. What she does with that chance is up to her now. I stayed in Indianapolis for another week, monitoring Rachel's progress. She was transferred to a private psychiatric facility that specialized in trauma recovery. The kind of place with soft walls and gardens and therapists who understood that sometimes surviving is its own kind of trauma. I visited her once before I left. No, she was in a common room staring out a window at the snow falling. She'd gained back 3 lb. The IV had helped with the immediate malnutrition, but she still looked hollow, used up. How are you feeling? I asked, sitting beside her. She didn't look at me. Empty, like someone reached inside and scooped everything out, like I'm just a shell pretending to be a person. That will get better with time, will it? Or will I just get better at pretending I'm okay? I didn't have an answer for that. Dr. Crane, can I ask you something? Of course. What you said about your wife about praying to her, was that true? I froze. Yes. Do you still do it? Pray to her? I thought about the past week, about deliberately not praying, about the silence in my house where Catherine's voice used to sing. No, not anymore. Does it help not praying to her? I don't know yet. Ask me in a year. She nodded slowly. Be careful, Dr. Crane, because I know what it's like to need something so badly that you'll feed anything to get it. I know what it's like to choose comfort over truth, and I know how hard it is to let go once you've started holding on. She finally looked at me then. Her eyes were clear but empty, like looking into deep water. I chose to live, she said, but I'm not sure living was the right choice. Every day I wake up and I have to remember that I killed the last piece of Emma that was left, that I chose to be alone rather than take comfort in her voice. And I don't know if I can live with that. Rachel, I'm not going to hurt myself, not yet anyway. The therapists here are good, they're helping, but Dr. Crane, I need you to understand something. You saved my life, but you also destroyed it, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that. I left Indianapolis that afternoon. The drive back to Chicago was quiet. The radio stayed off. I drove through the gathering dark and tried not to think about what I'd done. Helena called as I was crossing into Illinois. How is she? Alive, broken, but alive. And how are you? I didn't answer right away. I keep thinking about what she said, that I destroyed her life while saving it, and I wonder if she's right. You gave her a choice, Tim. That's all you could do, did I? Or did I manipulate her into making the choice I wanted her to make? I showed her those photographs of Julia. I painted the worst possible picture of what would happen if she didn't let go. Maybe I should have just let her make her own decision without my interference. Then she would have died within weeks. Is that what you wanted? I don't know what I wanted. I thought I was helping. Now I'm not sure. Tim, listen to me. You did the right thing. It might not feel like it now. It might not feel like it for years, but you gave her a chance to live. What she does with that chance is up to her. That's what Dr. Morrison said. because it's true, you can't save people from themselves. You can only give them options and hope they make the right choice. I hung up and drove the rest of the way in silence. When I got home, I stood in the doorway of my bedroom for a long time. Looking at Catherine's photograph on the nightstand, I picked it up, studied her face, her smile, the way her hair caught the light. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep talking to you like you're still here. It's not healthy, and I'm afraid of what might be listening." I put the photograph in a drawer, not throwing it away. I wasn't ready for that, but not keeping it where I could see it every day, where I could speak to it every night. That night I didn't pray. The silence was deafening, but I went to sleep anyway. 3 months have passed since Rachel's exorcism. I received monthly updates from her treatment team. She's stable, functioning. She's gained back most of the weight she lost. She's participating in therapy, following her medication regimen. But according to her therapist, she's fundamentally changed. The spark that makes someone want to live, to engage with the world, to find joy in small things, that's gone. She goes through the motions, shows up to sessions, says the right things, but behind her eyes, there's nothing but emptiness. She's mentioned suicide 3 times in therapy. Each time she's been talked down, but her therapist is concerned it's only a matter of time. I try not to think about that. Try to focus on the fact that she's alive, that I gave her a chance, that the rest is up to her. But late at night, I wonder if I made the right choice. Last week, Father Lampert called about a new case, a man in Detroit whose wife died of cancer 2 years ago. He hears a voice every night at midnight. She tells him about heaven, reminds him of their happy memories together. Begs him not to move on, not to forget her. Classic signs, textbook grief mimicry. I told Father Lampert I'd take the case, booked a flight for next week, started reviewing the preliminary files because what else can I do? This is my work now. Helping people who are being slowly devoured by their own grief, asking them to make impossible choices, living with the consequences. I've stopped praying to Catherine entirely, haven't spoken to her photograph in months, packed away most of her things. I'm seeing a therapist now, Dr. Sarah Chen, who specializes in traumatic loss. Twice a week, I sit in her office and talk about Catherine, about the guilt I carry for sleeping in that morning, about the anger I feel toward her for dying, about the loneliness. It helps slowly, painfully, but it helps. Dr. Chen asked me last week if I still hear Catherine's voice in the house. I lied and said no, because the truth is complicated. The truth is that sometimes when I'm standing in the bathroom at night, I hear it. Soft, distant, so faint I could convince myself it's just water in the pipes or wind through the vents. But it sounds like the Schubert lullaby. It sounds like Catherine singing. And I don't know if it's just memory, just my brain playing tricks, just the normal hallucinations of grief that are perfectly explained by psychology and neuroscience. Or if it's something else, something listening, something waiting, something that knows I'm vulnerable. Because I've spent 6 years creating openings with my prayers and my desperate hope that love survives death. Tonight, I stood in the bathroom and heard it again. A familiar melody, Catherine's voice, impossible and perfect and terrifying, and I did what Dr. Chen taught me. I acknowledged it, recognized it as a symptom of unprocessed grief, reminded myself that Catherine is dead and no amount of hearing her voice will change that. Then I went to bed without praying. But as I lay in the dark, I thought about Rachel, about the choice she made, about the emptiness that followed. And I thought about Julia and the widow in France and the father in New Orleans and all the other people throughout history who have chosen differently, who have chosen comfort over truth, who have chosen to feed the things that wait in the silence between the living and the dead. I understand why they made that choice now. In a way, I didn't before because the silence is unbearable. Dr. Gallagher was right. Grief is the price we pay for love. But he was also right about the other thing, the thing he didn't write in his letter, but implied in every photograph, every case study, every warning. Sometimes something else pays attention to that price, something ancient and hungry and patient, something that whispers in the voices of the dead. something that offers comfort in exchange for everything you are. And God help us, sometimes that bargain seems worth it. I turn over in bed, pull the covers up, and close my eyes. In the silence, I hear her singing. And despite everything I know, everything I've learned, everything I've witnessed, it still brings me comfort.